I need to consult a physicist or a philosopher, but someone who knows about time. Explain down below why it feels like October both lasted 2 days and also why the beginning of October feels like 2 years ago. I am confused. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel. I never know how to start videos. You guys might have noticed that, but basically it's the end of October. Let's talk about what I read. It's my October wrap up. I think overall October was a better reading month than I've been having lately. I read a fair bit and I was pretty happy with a lot of what I read, so I'm gonna count that as a success. The first book I finished in October was actually a carryover from September, and that was Lost Acre by Andrew Caldecott. This is the final book in the Rather Weird trilogy, which starts with the book Rather Weird. It is set in this very strange town that's been sort of cut off from the rest of England since I think the Elizabethan period, and adventures and magic and mystery that come out of this weird little place. I wanted to like this book so much more than I actually did. I have such positive, strong memories of the first book. I read it before I started Booktube, but I remember liking it and enjoying it so much. And then I found the second one kind of disappointing when I read it in, I think, February of this year. Okay, maybe it's just the middle book. Maybe it's gonna really all come together in the final book. It just didn't. I'll start with the positives though. The world is fascinating. I think the world building that Caldecott has done, the way he has thought about things, the way he has set everything up, all of that is fantastic and I love it. I also think a lot of the characters are inherently very interesting. I care about them. I want to learn more about them. I think they have interesting personalities and characteristics, but it does maybe suffer a bit from having too many of them. There's just so many characters that it starts to impede the story a little bit. And unfortunately, the plot just didn't work for me in this book. We spend a lot of this book following what the villain is doing and what he is up to, not from his perspective exactly, it's very third person, but we're seeing what the villain and his various colleagues, henchmen, etc. are doing. We're seeing what plotting they're up to, which could be interesting. But I didn't feel like I actually knew what the villain wanted. It felt like he's doing all this stuff and we're supposed to believe it's leading towards some evil event. But I didn't feel like I had a very good sense of like, what does he actually want to achieve? What is this villain aiming for? What is this disastrous thing that he wants? So we're spending a lot of time seeing what he's doing, but without that sense of, oh no, he's building towards this. It just wasn't that interesting. And that's not to say that I think a book is bad unless we know what the villain's goal is all the way through. I think the mystery can be very interesting. From what I remember in the first book in this series, we don't know what the villain is doing or who he is really or what he wants until close to the end. But the point is that we're following the protagonists and discovering with them and solving the mystery. In this case, we weren't solving the mystery exactly. We were seeing what the villain was doing, but we didn't know why, so it just felt very strange. And what's more, I didn't really understand what the protagonists wanted either. You got the sense that they're trying to fight against the villain, which, okay, fair, that's sort of a main setup, but I didn't understand why, and I don't feel like they knew why either. They didn't know what they were trying to work towards or what they were trying to figure out or anything. It just felt very muddled and lost, and it was hard to get invested in a story where it's like all these events are happening, but I don't know what any of them mean, why anyone cares about this, whether this is important or not. I think that could be done very well, but it was not in this case. I remember the first book in this series being filled with this complexity and mystery, and everything had so much depth, and the book was just packed with intrigue. I think I mentioned in a reading vlog, did I talk about this in a reading vlog? I think I talked about this in a reading vlog in September, which I will link up here. These books are very ornate, they're very detailed, there's so much going on. It's like looking at a wood carving where the closer and closer in, the more detail you see, the more intricate stuff there is. It's gorgeous, it's fascinating. But But where in the first book that felt like there was really a lot to discover and it was all coming together into this big picture that we would finally see, in the second and third book it just felt very surface level. It felt like decoration and detail for the sake of detail, not in service of anything. It just didn't live up to the expectations that I had, unfortunately. I almost feel tempted to go back and reread the first book at some point now, because I want to know whether it's a book that I still would recommend as like, this first book is solid, it is good, it is interesting, just read it and pretend the rest of the series doesn't exist. Or if going back, I would go, actually no, this doesn't work either, I'm misremembering. Then I finished an audiobook, Network Effect by Martha Wells. This is the 5th book in the Murderbot Diaries series and the first full-length novel. I really liked what Wells did with this and how she took advantage of the longer book to pull together even more characters and bring in some things that came up in previous books and pull them all together for an even bigger adventure. I thought it was really, really fun. I still really enjoyed the series, but I talked about how much I love Murderbot so much in my September wrap-up that I will just link that up here and not repeat myself. I'm sorry if I sound really congested. I was wearing a sweater that I haven't worn in like 8 months just before filming this, and I think it was dusty and it's making me congested, but the show must go on, so hopefully it's not too distracting. The next book I read was The Cursed Hermit by Kris Bertin and Alexander Forbes. This is a graphic novel mystery and is the second in the Hobtown Mysteries series. The series is all about like weird, creepy, supernatural, secret society mysteries in a very small town on the east coast of Canada in the 1990s. One thing I really appreciated is that the second book, which this was, started with a one-page summary of what had happened in the previous book and also like little character portraits with the names of our main characters. I found that so helpful. I'm sure it's totally unnecessary if you're reading them back to back, but it had been literally a year since I read the first book in the series, so it was great to get that just like quick little reminder of like, right, this name goes with this face, here's the 5 key plot points from the previous book, let's get into the story. That was a great detail that I really appreciated. In this book, we focus on 2 of our 5 teen detectives who are sent off to this weird, like, prep school, boarding school thing over the Christmas holidays. It's shown as like a super like prestigious, oh, it's so fancy that you got chosen to go to this, but then they get there and things are weird, things are creepy. What's going on? It's very mysterious, and of course they have to figure out what's up with this weird school. I'm not sure how these books would hold up to a more like critical, serious, really focused review type reading, but for me they are the perfect book to read while lying on the couch over Thanksgiving. That's how I read the first one last year, that's how I read this one, and I really, really hope that the author comes out with a third one so that I can read it next year, because they're just perfect for that. And all of you Americans who have Thanksgiving coming up soon, take note and maybe see if you can pick these books up, because seriously, it's an amazing combination. I then finished another audiobook, and that was Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. This is the 6th book in the Murderbot Diaries series, and unfortunately the final one that has been published so far. There's a couple of little like short stories that I want to track down somewhere, but I'm avidly awaiting more from this series, and I think I'm actually going to go check out Martha Wells' other books, because she seems to have a lot of other stuff that she's written, and I want to read/listen to it because I'm really hooked on her writing. The 6th book is another novella, and in this one, Murderbot solves a mystery. I liked the story. As you can see, I'm still in love with this series, but I am kind of confused. Everything I found online lists this book as the 6th in the series, and it is the 6th in terms of publication order. But to me, it feels like it should take place at like the 3rd or 4th book in the series slot. It feels like it takes place before the 5th book chronologically. I don't know if that's actually the case and they've just published them in a different order, or if it's something about how she wrote them. I'm not sure. It still works as a 6th book, but the way the characters are interacting and what's going on, it does feel a little out of place, and I found it a bit confusing at times. Not enough to make me not like the book, but enough to have me going, huh? What's going on here? Like, why isn't this character mentioned at all? Shouldn't they be part of this? So I don't know. If anyone knows anything else, please let us know down in the comments. Next up, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This was my first du Maurier novel, and spoilers, I'm a fan. I read this as a buddy read with Michelle Lexie. I will link her channel down below, and I have to say, one, amazing booktuber to buddy read. Just so much insightful conversation and thought, and like, it was a joy to buddy read with her. And two, this book in particular is like, wow, the perfect book to buddy read. I actually think I enjoyed it so much more because of the conversation we were having along the way and having those discussions at short intervals. It was perfection. Rebecca is narrated from the first person, and we follow the unnamed narrator as she marries the much older Maxim de Winter and travels to his ancestral home, manor, whatever you want to call it, of Manderley, where everyone is still sort of obsessed with Maxim's first wife, Rebecca. I didn't know anything about the plot of this going in, so I'm not going to say anything more about the plot right now because this book is so suspenseful and so thrilling, and it was so exciting to discover what was going on as I was reading that I think if somehow you have come to this year and don't really know anything like I didn't, just read the book because I think that's going to be a great experience. What I will say, however, is that this felt like the best use of a first-person narrator that I have read in so long, possibly ever. The entire book, I felt so acutely aware of the fact that we're seeing this story, we're hearing this story through the narrator's perspective, and we're never told explicitly that she's an unreliable narrator. There's nothing that explicitly suggests or tells us that maybe her version of events isn't the true version of events, but the way everything is written, you're very, very aware and reminded of the fact that we all experience the world through our own eyes. I'm not sure if that actually says what I think it says, but basically it makes you very, very acutely aware that the way I experience a situation is going to be different to the way everyone else in the room experiences a situation, even though we're all in the same situation. All right, I need to not say the word situation again, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. The way this book is written really, really highlighted that for me, and I thought it was so interesting. And in so many ways, this style of narration really added to the sense of suspense. It added to the mystery. It wasn't just, this is how the story is told. The style of telling was integral to the effect of the story, and I think that was fantastic. As you can tell, I really, really loved Rebecca, and that's a really good thing because I have a lovely Folio Society edition that I bought years ago before I'd read the book, and now I'm thrilled to keep that on my shelves because now I can be like, yes, I do legitimately love this book and I think it is great. Also, I definitely need to read more du Maurier. I'm so excited to read more of her novels now, maybe some of her short stories. I think Michelle and I are talking about reading some more maybe in the new year or something, and I'm so looking forward to it. Now we come to my pick for Victober, which was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I ended up listening to an audiobook of this because I realized, I don't know, 2 weeks before the end of the month that there was no way I was going to have time to read the actual book. But I definitely had time to listen to it, so that's what I did, and I think it was a fantastic choice. I listened to the recorded books edition, because of course, this is such a famous old novel, like, there's loads of audiobooks. I listened to the recorded books edition. I thought it was really good. The narrator really worked with the writing style for me, except for the fact that there was one passage where a French poem is included, and I almost just wonder if they should have just gotten a different narrator for that section because it was read in a way that I couldn't tell if it was in French or Italian. I had to actually get out my ebook and check because I couldn't tell with the narrator's reading what language it was in. That's 30 seconds of the book though, and overall the narration was great. I wasn't sure what to expect for the reading experience of The Picture of Dorian Gray because I pretty much knew what was gonna happen. I'm not gonna say it out loud now in case you haven't read the book and don't want to be spoiled, but I knew the big plot points, I think, and I was sort of is this still going to be interesting if I know roughly what's happening and where this is going to end? And it definitely was. This feels strange to say, but it was incredibly enjoyable to read. so much of this book is people doing and saying absolutely terrible, awful things, but it is all done in the most beautiful way. The character of Lord Henry especially will have these statements where I'm like, how is this both so incredibly wrong and horrible and awful, and also the most gorgeously said and quotable thing I have ever read? Especially in the first few chapters, I just felt like every line, if I'd been reading an ebook or a physical book, I would have been highlighting, being like, this is awful, but it's a gorgeous quote. Oh, but this is awful and this is a gorgeous quote. And that was very much how I felt about the book in general. If you haven't seen Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot's video about rereading books that he read about 10 years ago, I will link that up here or down below or something. In that video, he talks about rereading some Victorian classics that he first read about 10 years ago and when he was really starting to get into reading as a hobby as an adult. And then he's now reread them this October, and he talks about his experience and what he had changed, what stayed the same, what he liked differently, how his approach was different to these books. Reading The Picture of Dorian Gray 100% felt like a book that I need to set an alarm on my phone or something for 10 years from now. I mean, I won't have the same phone 10 years from now. In my email, maybe? Anyway, I need to set an alarm for 10 years from now to say, reread this book. I want to return to this book when I am older, when I have more life experience, and try and figure it out a bit more, because I didn't love it, I also didn't hate it, and I don't know what I think about it exactly yet, and I'm not sure I'm ready to know what I think about it quite yet either. The last book on my October TBR, and the second last book that I read, was The Witch by Ronald Hutton. The full subtitle will be down in the description. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. This is I don't even know how to describe this book exactly. It's a study of the fear of witchcraft and a study of how witchcraft came to be viewed and experienced in the way that it was in the 15th and 16th century, I think, in Europe and specifically in England, and how that society and that culture arrived at the point of having these mass witch trials and these mass witch burnings. Where did that come from? Why then? Why these specific characteristics? In order to study that topic, however, Hutton uses studies on witchcraft from all over the world and from different periods in time to sort of help build an understanding of how the fear of witchcraft emerges in a society, how it manifests in a society, and how we can understand the similar and different aspects of this emergence. I found it really, really fascinating. I really enjoyed it. I loved how it's not just about what did people think at this point in time or how did they get here, but also how the study of how the field of studying this has gotten there. I think it's called histography. I can't remember the word, but I'll try and find it and put it up on the screen. But like the study of the topic, it's a bit of both, and I loved it. I feel like my nerd is coming out so strong, but I found it so fascinating. I thought it was so interesting. It's an approach that I want to read more of. That being said, this book is what I can only describe as incredibly academic. You definitely don't need like a post-secondary education in history to read and appreciate it. I don't have that. I haven't studied history since high school. I understood it, it was fascinating, it was great. So I don't say that in a gatekeeping elitist way or anything, just that if you read this book, know that it is written as an academic work, not as a book for a popular audience. Again, I feel so snobby saying that, but I really don't mean it in that way. I'm saying it and I'm trying to explain this because I saw that this book had a lot of negative reviews from people who didn't like the style, didn't like the tone. And that's fair. They're allowed to not like it. They don't have to give it positive reviews. But I think that this is a book that's not for everyone. It's very slow. It's very dry. The style of writing is what can only be described as academic. It's not a light fun book. And there's nothing wrong with either of these. And I'm not saying that one or the other of those is better or worse or more valuable or anything, just that if the topic sounds interesting, read a sample online and see if it's a style of writing that's going to work for you. Because I think this is the sort of book that it is either 15 hours of incredible but slow enjoyment, or you're gonna read it and go, this is the worst book I have ever read. Why was this even written? And there's nothing wrong with feeling that way, just don't waste your time with it if it's not what you're into. As I said though, for me, it was fantastic. I loved it. It was the perfect book to read like a little section a day before I went to sleep or something like that. And honestly, I'm tempted to check out Hutton's other works. I think he has a few other books and I want to read them now because I actually really enjoyed his style. And finally, I mentioned in my October TBR that if I finished all 5 books that were on the TBR, I might pick up Mrs. Death by Salena Godden. And since I finished them, I got to and I read it. So this is my final book for October. Haven't read it, I don't know how to describe it any more than I did before I'd read it, so I'm going to stick to the same explanation basically, which is that Mrs. Death, the embodiment, the spirit, the whatever you want to call it, of death, is tired. She's invisible. She's the most invisible of people in this world, and that's the old poor black woman cleaning up after humanity. No one sees her, not because of some mystical thing, but because of who she is. And she's worn out, she's tired, she's been doing this forever, and she's starting to question everything. And then she forms a relationship, interaction, I don't know what to call it, with a young writer named Wolf who has suffered a lot of loss in their own life, and they form a bit of a working relationship when Wolf decides that they're going to write about Mrs. Death. The way this book is set up is super, super interesting. I don't know if there's a word for this style, but it's in the style where one of the characters is writing the book and we're following as they're writing the book that we are reading. I don't know how to describe it, but it's really, really cool. I thought the writing was beautiful. It's partly in prose, partly in verse, and it was really, really moving at times, very, very impactful. And throughout all of it, it had such a stark feeling of reality, and I don't know how to say this without giving stuff away about the book, but these things would be happening, and it's maybe magical realism. I don't know if magical realism could be applied to this. It's very much a book that I don't know how I should interpret the events, and I think there's a lot of different ways you could interpret what's happening, but it felt so incredibly based in the world that we live in, and I thought that was fascinating and wonderfully done. This is another book that I want to reread. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I had the headspace this month to really sit with what it was saying and really consider and think on all of the topics and the ideas that it raised, but I want to come back and do that in the future. I also think this would be an amazing book club pick, but probably very divisive. So if your book club likes books where half the group is going to love it and half the group is going to hate it, this could be a really cool pick because I think there would be some amazing discussion to be had. And honestly, if you want to do that, let me know because I'd be really down. And finally, I will mention that it is only 150 pages long, so if you are still looking for things to pick up for Novella November, then very cool candidate. Alright, I have no idea how long I've been talking about books, but my throat is sore, so I'm gonna stop here and go make myself some tea. Let me know down below which of these are you most excited about / did you like the most when you read? And I hope you had a great October and have a fantastic November. If you liked this video, please give it a like down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.